official holiday. The real history of Crimea's Christianization was not as linear as it appeared in nationalistically charged narratives depicted so often and in so many variations. Nevertheless, even Russian today will subscribe to the following statement about the importance of the Crimea as a holy ground and a bastion against the unholy, foremost in our times the Ukrainians and the Muslim Tatars. It was published in 1910 and could well have been written in 2014. I quote, "The history of Christianity in the Crimea is not only very closely related to the history of this place, but to the history of the whole of Russia, and thus for each of us it's achieved a special meanings." Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
So,
I have Russian.
yes, please. I will come to you to be more close.
All right. Although Ottoman Empire and later Turkey cannot be considered as a true inheritant of Byzantine Empire, can we say to some extension that nowadays Turkey can also claim that the Crimea is their land, as they have had longer history and common history, let us say, and relationships?
There were always attempts to do like that, because as you know that the Crimean Khanate had a very close relationship. It was a kind of suzerainty for many centuries, but the Khanate has always very special relationship. It wasn't just a province or something like that. It was a very enthusiastic and intelligent supporter of the Ottoman empires to some extent, but there were also very strong opportunity against the Sultan. But the Sultan was, of course, the religious. He was also the Caliph for the Crimean Tatars, and therefore he had at least religious superiority upon the Muslim Tatars. And as you know, there is a strong cultural relationship between these two nationalities due to history, and the language is very, very close. And there is today, but for centuries, a strong Muslim and Tatar diaspora, for example in Istanbul, but in former times in the Ottoman Empire, also in the Dobruja. And there were some attempts always that the Istanbul wanted to have somehow have the Crimea back, yeah. But when we look at the Turkish politics today, in my opinion, they are very, very careful, because they know, even for economic reasons, that the Russian-Turkey relationship is very important for them. For economic reasons, even for political reasons, to have some influence in the in Eurasia and concerning other Muslim states. So at the moment I can't observe that they said it's our Crimea. But of course they supported if it's appropriate for them, if it makes some sense for them and it's not dangerous, they made some attempts to claim a special relationship to the Crimea. But even if we look at the Soviet times, for example, in the 1920s, when there was a very, very nationalistic diaspora of Crimean Tatars in Ankara, for example, for Ataturk it was more important to have good relationships with Soviet Russia. There was, for example, the Treaty of Kars, where they decided to have a good relationship, and in this time they never tried to influence this the position of the Crimea. In the First World War, there were some negotiations between Germany, the Austrian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. What will happen after we have won yes, but it became no real outcome because they lost the war.
But it wasn't actually somewhere written that the Crimea can be later let's say annexed by
yes, yes. There was some thoughts about it, and there were some papers, but there was no real outcome of this. Yeah.
So what are your views on the future? You know, this image is provocative for Ukrainian, you know, because it indicates Crimea as a Russian territory, which basically it is now. You know, it's hard to say no to it.
Yeah.
You know, it's what it is right now.
Yeah.
But still, what is your forecast?
Yeah, forecast.
If you were a political consultant.
Oh yes.
To indicate what steps need to be taken to, and what would probably be the better steps to take. To leave it in their hands or to.
No. Actually, in the last 3 years, I was quite often asked from television, from politicians, from the press, what will be the best? Yeah, what should we do? What should Europe do to change the situation again? And I'm always very yes, and I'm a historian. I'm not a Cassandra who are able to look in the future. But for me it's perfectly clear that it was a crime what Russia did. It was against international law, and I think.
But was it a crime against historical law? You know, the history. Was it?
Oh yes. What does it mean? Actually, when we go back, when we go back to the 17th century, then we have to say, okay, it was a Crimean Tatar state. When we go back to the 15th century, we can say, okay, there were some Italians, what does it mean? It's of course it's true that from 1783 to 1954, before Khrushchev gave under completely different circumstances the Crimea to the Ukrainian Socialist Republic. It was somehow Russian, and of course the situation on the Crimea was, as far as I remember, is the atmosphere is quite more Russian than Ukrainian, of course. And maybe there should have been a negotiation from the 1990s on to change the status of the Crimea somehow, maybe to become a more autonomous region, or maybe to become independent somehow, or maybe to become something that would have been ruled together from Russia or the Ukraine, or anyhow. But just to go there with soldiers and take violently. This area is against the international law. What will happen nowadays? It's of course a frozen conflict. It's a frozen conflict, for example, like in Abkhazia, as in South Ossetia or something like that, or Nagorno-Karabakh. I think the expectation many Russians on the Crimea had are not fulfilled, because I think for most Russians on the Crimea, the basic reason was that they expected a better life, money from Russia, from Moscow. They expected that the wages would be higher, that there would be more economic prosperity, that the Russia will give enormous sums to them. But I think nowadays, when I have some contacts with people there, most of them are very disappointed, because the situation is not as good as they expected. Yeah, the problem is of course that not only for the Crimea, but for the Ukraine as a whole, the last 20-25 years, the economic situation developed not as good as it should have been, you know, as it could have been, yeah, because Ukraine is basically a very, very rich land with I think with
opportunities, yes.
With perspectives, yeah, but and I think that's a part of the problem. But this situation, and I know I wouldn't have been very provocative, but I think for the next year it will be like this. But that does not mean that the Ukraine, the Western world, the United Nations or anybody, or the international community should say, okay, it's like that and we have nothing to do. Yeah?
Well, today there was the president of Czech Republic was in Russia, I think.
Okay.
Or at least I read it today, maybe it was yesterday, but he suggested that Ukraine should just request reparations for this, and this will settle, you know, which you know seems like, you know, one man's opinion, but still, since, you know, this is a president of a European nation telling this and suggesting it, you know, this it sort of, you know, is a first step maybe for the Western community to suggest something that is not really supporting our you know, situation really. It's a, you know, they froze it, so to some extent they froze the situation for a couple of years, and now they're sort of presenting a way to actually keep it this way, which is troubling. Troubling to Ukraine.
But it would mean that Moscow or Ukraine will sell.
Right.
Yeah, that's not a good possibility. And I think the Czech president, as far as I've heard from him, is not a very intelligent man.
Right.
Yes, and I think he has not the backup from the European Union as a whole. Yeah. Especially, I think the German politicians and France will not support this, because you know, we have even inside the European Union we have quite a number of such unsolved problems, territorial and minority problems. Just look to Catalonia, to Scotland, to the Basque, yeah, and there are many others. South Tyrol for Austria, and so on. And I think such proposal is not good for other unsolved conflict regions.
So Europe would not support this kind of proposal?
No, I think we can't take this serious. So that's not a good idea. And I hope the Kievan president and the government will react like that. So it's you can't sell part of your territory. Yeah, we have.
Because he actually quoted the Alaskan.
Yes, like that. Yeah, for $1 million. Yeah, very cheap nowadays. And I think the Russians regretted that they sold it. Yeah. No. So, but what's
is it really a bargain, let us say, for Russian? Because Crimea is economically inefficient for them. Yes, they pay lots of money in order to keep the Crimea working, and it's a question.
Why do they need it now? You know, the name of your presentation, Holy Land.
Yeah.
But you know, when Nikolai or a Russian king would say this, this made sense. When Putin and the post-socialist Russia, which is probably more socialist than it was under Soviet Union somehow, it's still ruled by KGB people, but they don't really use that kind of rhetoric anymore. You know? So why do they need it now?
I think for several reasons. First, I think they perfectly know that it costs enormous sums. Yeah. But I think it's worth for them. It's worth for them for Russia because it has a high symbolic potential. It was a very, very special moment. We had the Olympic Games in Sochi. The world, Russia had made somehow a good presentation, despite all these quarrels and complaints before the Olympic Games. There was the Euromaidan. It was not quite clear, I think, for the Kremlin what will happen in Kiev and in the whole Ukraine. And as you know, just a couple of months before these events, the situation and the position of Putin was not so comfortable. Yeah, there were many demonstrations against them. People like Navalny and others, they demonstrated not only in Moscow but also in other towns, and the popularity of Putin was quite low. And afterwards, until now, despite of economic problems, despite of there are some demonstrations again, and I think this mixture. I think the Kremlin thought this is a good situation, yeah. And of course, I think after the Orange Revolution there were already some plans to do it sometimes, yeah. And they just put it out of the.
Took out the drawer
of the drawer and now.
So nowadays it's just the instrument to switch the focus, the attention from internal problems.
Yes. And we know from history, and there are many evidence that a tiny little war or a tiny little occupation very often helped politicians to increase their standing. Yeah. And I think this was the situation, but I think that Moscow know perfectly well that it will cost much of money, much of energy, and they were, at least for a couple of months, the pariah of the West. But now, because of Syria, because of many other unsolved problems, maybe, and we see that many politicians, for example, even in Germany, they said, we have to reconcile with Russia again, and maybe he's not as crazy as Trump is. They're right, yeah, and Putin is much more intelligent than Trump, yeah, but he is, despite
much
of the
more
very,
evil.
much more, he's very dangerous at the same time, yeah.
But even so, he's not eternal.
And that's
the historical perspectives are. But last year Navalny, when he was asked about what would his disposition be if he won the presidential election, and he's still, it's a very good for him to say. It's like the question to Christ, when they asked Christ, when Christ asked about whether John the Baptist's baptism were from God or from, and the Pharisees knew no answer. For Navalny to say, I will give Crimea back to Ukraine, would mean to lose the elections because people support that.
Of course.
So probably whoever wins the elections in Russia will not change that policy.
Of course not. And Navalny is a nationalist too, yeah. And I think even his position towards Ukraine is not so friendly.
It's not so friendly.
Yes.
Right.
And we have to be very careful that in the German-speaking press, he sometimes presented us as he's a good politician. Yeah, but I always say no. He's not so friendly against other Slavic people from the former Soviet Union. Yeah. He's not the salvator. Yeah.
Well, to be successful in Russia, you have to be like
Yes, yes, that's your point. That's
you have to be,
important.
because otherwise you are losing. You're fighting a losing battle.
Yeah. So, and what's your opinion towards the Crimea? Do you think it's a real loss for many Ukrainians, despite of the violations of your territory and?
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I still think it's not permanent for sure. If like this occupation is just temporary.
Well, hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully, yeah.
But I feel that it was much more long time. It doesn't happen 2 years ago. It's just from the beginning they make press impacts, different impacts. That I was never during the Ukrainian independence in the Crimea. But during Soviet time I was very often.
Maybe, yeah.
I was every year there. So for me it's very logical that they just took the power legally. But I want to ask you about Austrian pro-Russian, pro-Moscow lobby. I just hear recently about this.
Yeah.
What they are?
Not most Russian, but some influential, not all Austrians, but some influential Austrians have a very pro-Russian stance. And especially some big firms, entrepreneurs, they made good money with Russia. And there are lots of Austrian investments in Russia, but in Ukraine as well. When I walked around Lviv, I saw Raiffeisenbank, for example. There is a Strabag, building autobahn in Russia and in Crimea. And the Austrian peasants sold tons of apples and I don't know to Russia, and there's some especially the economic groups they pressured the Austrian government to become more friendly towards Russia.
For economical reasons.
I think for economic.
So they lost a huge market there.
Yes, they lost. But there are other very pro-Ukrainian groups, and I think especially, and I include myself in this group, the academia, because it's very pro-Russian, and maybe you know that in our institute, in the Institute of East European History, we have the biggest concentrations of historians in the German-speaking world. Working on Ukrainian subjects,
especially in Galicia.
Yes, especially
being part of Austrian
yes.
Hungarian.
And we always try to do a good work to popularize the Ukrainian position in the press, in the medias. And but and I think it's the same in Ukraine that the academia has sometimes not the best position, but we are doing our best, and we just founded Austrian-Ukrainian Historical Commission, where Oleg Turi is also a member, and Jaroslav Hrydzak is also a member. And we try to do some grassroots work to popularize the Ukrainian position in Austria among the interested society. So that's what we can do, and to do such exchange. And to invite people from Ukraine to Austria to say that's what is about. So but it's said like that.
Let me ask you a more personal question. Why would you personally would get involved with this part of the world, to study it, to choose as a subject for your... was there some kind of... where did the inspiration come from?
When I started to study, Russia, the East was very exotic. Well, you know, my colleagues always started to go, oh, I like to go to America, I like to go to French, I like to go to England, to France, to England. How boring, everybody goes to the West, why don't you go to the East? There's something going on here. And that's why I decided to go to the East, and I studied in Krakow, in Warsaw, and I was the first time in 1992, I think, in Ukraine, in Lviv. And
when was your first visit to Crimea?
Yeah, when it was, I think it was 2001 or 2. Yeah.
I have never been there. So.
Yeah, it's a treasure. It's a real treasure. It's at least in the south and in the mountains. It's like paradise. Did you ever been there?
No.
Yeah.
This summer I went to see the border.
Oh yeah, okay.
Which is the border now, but from the Kherson region.
Hopefully we can go there again. I think now it's not a good idea, and at the moment if I would like to go, I would need a second passport, because otherwise I could not enter the Ukraine again.
Right.
And Ukraine is for me much more important now. Yeah, so, and I don't like to support the system. That's for sure. So that was my inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And I never regretted it. It's a very good experience. Yeah.
It strikes Ukrainians a lot that people like Timothy Snyder, like yourself, like many others, you know, that we are interesting. It strikes us, you know, sometimes, you know, that we are our history, our land, our you know, perspectives, and all that this is interesting to the people abroad. Maybe this was the Soviet era suppression or something that did this,
but now it's a lot going on concerning historical research on Ukraine. It's part of Europe. It's as European as Belgium or the Netherlands. Yeah, it's from the Austrian perspective. It was a part of the fatherland, of the monarchy, and it's not far away from. Unfortunately, when you go by train now, it took more time from Vienna to Lviv than in the Habsburg monarchy. Nearly, 15 hours or so by train.
Yes.
But in Habsburg monarchy it was much faster. Yeah. So.
Well, now it's well connected by car.
Yes.
So the highway you can go almost all the way. And they're announced today, I think, or yesterday again, the plans to construct a highway from Lviv to Mukachevo, so Vienna would be connected. You know,
so I'm looking forward. So.
There's a time on the border you will.
One more question.
Yes, of course.
I'm sorry, because time is flying. Because, well, you know, you studied Russia a lot. What are, again, looking into the future, do they have a next target, maybe Belarus or other territories that... because Belarus is, you know, this is a question. There is a question mark until this president is in place. He's playing the cards very well, being independent, you know, but friendly with Russia, of course, and trying to sort of, you know, be friendly with everybody, playing games with everybody. Yeah. What is your you know, is Russia having in the drawer plans for taking that over as well, and
I'm very afraid with forecast. in 2014, I was really afraid that the Russian will take the whole northern shores of the Black Sea and go directly to Transnistria.
Really?
Yes, I was afraid, and I wasn't the only one, because
So the southern part
yes,
of Ukraine
yes,
to have a connection
yeah,
to connect it
yeah,
all.
yeah. Okay, but they stopped. But
Well,
it's
why? Then looking into the history, not
Yeah.
into the future. Why?
to the
Did-
history,
they did not do this.
because
And why did it not put more effort into occupying Donbass? Because it seemed like they were
Yeah.
sort of reluctant,
Yes, that's
ready to, but
yeah,
not quite.
yeah,
So why
yeah,
was that?
Yeah, no go for
More
right, yeah,
forceful.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, historically, and I think there are some groups inside the Russian among the Russian elites who like to popularize the word Novaya Rossiya again, yeah, and for historical reasons that it was Russia, it was South Ukraine, but for
It
them
was
it
probably
was
more
yeah.
Russia than Crimea
Yeah.
to some extent.
Yes, of course. And I think there are some groups who would like such moving westwards. And I think also in Transnistria there are some groups waiting for this salvator, but maybe it's too dangerous. It's too costly.
Too aggressive.
Too
towards
aggressive.
Europe.
Yes, too aggressive.
Towards NATO.
Because, for example, the oil price today is lower than it was. Yeah, it's enormous. Maybe they should. The Russian army needs much more modernization nowadays. Yeah, they know. They know they did something. Yeah, they became more modern. Yeah, more progressive. But they're not finished with renovation process. Belarus, yeah, that's okay. They made a couple of weeks ago this big maneuver, Zapad, yes, and the Belarusian government was more friendly to the West again. They invited some journalists. Oh, look what we've done, and the Russian were like that. It depends a bit on Lukashenko's former policy. I think if he really if he would become very, very controversial towards Moscow, I think, yeah.
Then they could have.
Yes, but if as long as he behaves like this, maybe, just a bit friendly towards the West and more open, but not too much, then I think Belarus can survive like this. And towards the Baltics or Poland, I think at the moment it would be rather dangerous for Russia, yes, for Putin.
Because of NATO, because of European Union.
Yes, and the NATO did something, and there are much more soldiers of the NATO now there in the Baltics and even in Poland than before. So I don't think so. But and there are still the unsolved problem with Luhansk and Donetsk and. But that's of course the question why the Russia behaves like
because
that.
also we are living in a bit of tension if maybe tomorrow they decide to actually take it over.
Yes, of course.
It would be
you
easy.
can't foresee. Yeah,
it would be easy, and so we'll see.
We will see. Yeah,
we will see.
Maybe it's.
Well, thank you
Be
very
like
much.
that.
This
Yes,
was
thank you
very
for your
interesting,
interest.
especially for me because since I really personally knew very little about the problematics there.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
And thank you also for your questions and
Again, I'm a bit have to apologize for the absence of many
No,
students,
it's
but
okay.
it's and
We can present them.
they will have the chance to watch it later.
It's just an offer and
And
maybe
see what
next
they
time.
missed.
Yes.
What they missed.
Okay.